The restoration of Peter. We did look at that. That's what we ended up with last week. Father, bless our lesson today, and all those that are coming in, bring them in. I know, Father, for their safety, and for the sheep that are here today, Father, for feeding that we all need now in Christ's name. Amen. All right, a threefold restoration. Now, this I have preached out of here, and this particular one, I told you last week, I think Tammy had gotten the outline. I don't know if she was over at Cleveland Baptist. It's got to be 25 years ago or so. Somehow she heard that it wasn't their preachers. It was an evangelist or a special preacher came in. I personally didn't get this outline. Listen, I write them down wherever we beg, borrow, and steal, wherever you can get it. You have 3 unique thoughts in your life. That's what's been said. That's what. What's the guy from Ruckman's right-hand guy? Jim McGahee. Yeah, three unique thoughts. He's been waiting for his 3. Right? Everything else is begged, borrowed, and stole. Right? There's probably a method to having thoughts, but anyway, this restores us in verse 15. Restores his strength, his fellowship, and usefulness. That's a good outline. Now, there's all kinds of that you can get out of this John 21, and I used to try to give you all my sermons as we went through it. Especially when we go through survey. It takes us about 5 years to go through survey. I think I've gone through it twice. Just twice. Not 3 times. Twice we went through survey. It takes 5 years to do that. I'm thinking about maybe we ought to do that again. It's been 20-some years. Anyway. A threefold denial in the chapter before. In Matthew 26, I'm sorry. A threefold, it was a threefold piece where we ended up that last item there in the chapter before. A threefold confession, as far as his love. A threefold commission, feed my lambs, feed my sheep, feed my sheep. A threefold confrontation. That's pretty straightforward. Now moving on. Verse 15, thou knowest. So Christ's omniscience, he knows everything. The omnipotence, omniscience, and omnipresence. Any of those words biblical? I don't think any of those are. Not to say they're not biblical. They're not Bible words. They're not Bible words. Bible is not a Bible word, by the way. Bible is not found in the Bible. It's only found on the cover of your Bible. Right? So, a threefold omniscience. Thou knowest, verse 15, verse 16, thou knowest, verse 17, thou knowest all things. So a threefold omniscience. Now, I think last week I told you the book of Jude, if you're ever in there, that is full of all kinds of threes. 3 of this, 3 of that, droves of them, and so on. Verse 9, is that what's next on your list? Okay, verse 9. The confrontation of Peter. These are good. Who knows where I get this stuff from? The confrontation of Jesus. He is warming himself by the fire there. I did add the judgment seat of Christ in there. And they saw a fire of coals there. Now remember, in type, they're on shore, which is in type on this. That's a type of being in heaven. Where they were in the ship, which is a type of being in this world and in the church. All right, so fire is a sign of judgment. What is the metal that would be used for that? Brass. And the sky would be, what would the sky be, judgment? I think iron. If we go back to the Old Testament. If you go over here to Revelation chapter 1, we could throw this in here. Don't they, it's in his feet brass or something? Yeah, look at verse 15, Revelation 1. And his feet like unto fine brass, as if they burned in a furnace. All right? Brass, element or a, what would be the other word?
Alloy.
An alloy. Yeah, thank you. Element or alloy? It's an alloy. Brass is made up of, and there's different grades of brass. Soft brass, half-hard brass, yellow brass. Give me another name.
Red.
Red brass? Well, I haven't heard that. Okay, red brass.
White brass.
Bright, I've heard that term. Bright brass. Half-hard, bright brass, yellow brass, red brass.
Brass tacks.
But there's different grades of how much you put into the alloy. It's a mixture. And then I don't know if it's a chemical reaction. Oh, there's a difference between a compound and a mixture. We're going back to science class, 5th grade, huh? A mixture and a compound. A compound is a mixture something that can be separated and a compound cannot? That sounds reasonable. Mixture means I can separate it. Thermal setting plastic is a hardener and a resin. There's some paints that are that way. When you put them together, they cannot be separated. That would then be a compound. So brass, I don't know if you can separate it. How do you separate crude oil? That's putting it into a what?
Distillation process.
It's a giant still, and that's called what? A cracking plant. If you're driving through Texas or Oklahoma and you see this stuff with pipes going everywhere, it's a gigantic still, and all that stuff is piped off at different temperatures. Gasoline, kerosene, diesel. Give me another one if there's anything else in there.
Motor oil.
Motor oil? Okay.
How about that?
Yeah.
Light oils. Cooking oil.
No. Not in that kind.
Kerosene.
All right. Anyway, it's well, we're getting beyond the Bible here. But, those are all good things. If you learn that, tomorrow you might meet somebody that, and then you can talk intelligently, and then once you make a bond, they're more willing to accept a gospel tract. Yes?
Brass is an alloy of copper and zinc.
Copper and zinc. All right, 60% copper, so much zinc, and then they throw in other glue in there. Okay, and the copper is the soft part, I would say. The more the softer it is, it's tough to cut. But the softer it is, the more you can hammer it too. It's more ductile. All right, fire and judgment. That is a type of John 18. Let's go there. Let's just go ahead and look at these verses. John 18:18. John 18:18. And the servants stood there and made, fire of coals. All right, of judgment. He warms his hands by the devil's fire, right? Judgment. This is which is taking place at the denial when he's in the court, and he's going to deny him 3 times. And when we did that, I don't know if we did that for Sunday school. There are some good sermons out of there too, and I have never heard of them. Never heard of them. I made these ones myself. About the 3 denials. They are all different. They are all different. And one time before we were in the hut, what we called the hut, we were preaching in the house 21, this is going on 22 years ago now. Isn't it? Is this our 22nd anniversary? It's our 21st. 21 years ago, we had a rooster, and we got it from the inner city Cleveland on the near west side. Guy wanted to get rid of it. It was, who was that? The Joneses, the Millers. The Millers said the neighbor wanted to get it. We took the rooster. It wasn't a gamecock. It was a pretty rooster, and we called it Grandpa. My father-in-law was living with us. And I preached a sermon, and I said, and the cock crew, that thing would crow right on cue. You know, it was in the summertime, and the cock crew, and that thing crowed every time I said it. It was just the weirdest thing. It was a Bible-believing rooster. One time we were at the pond right across the street from us, and we were doing we did all our baptisms in there. So, and I said, it's a picture of the death, burial, and the resurrection, and this bass comes flying out of the water. It was, remember that? Came flying out of the water as soon as I said that. Just flew right out of the water. He was probably trying to catch a fly or something. I don't know. Anyway, he warms himself there, obviously in verse 9 where we're at there. Isaiah 6:6, when they take let's turn there, takes the live coal and places it on Isaiah's tongue. I'm a man of unclean lips. Yeah, he does say that in verse 5. Because I am a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips, for mine eyes have seen the King, Lord of hosts. Then flew one of the seraphims unto me, having a live coal in his hand, which he had taken with the tongs from off the altar. So it's a type of judgment, purification, sanctification, and so on in our life. Now if we go to the judgment seat, 1 Corinthians 3, 1 Corinthians 3, where it says, trying our works as if by fire, and if they're burned up, we suffer loss. 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verses 13 through 15, every man's work shall be manifest, and it's of what sort it is. Where does it say sort? Oh yeah, in the same verse. For the day shall declare it, because it shall be revealed by fire. And the fire shall try every man's work of what sort it is. If any man's work abide, which he hath built thereon, he shall receive a reward. If any man's work shall be burned, he shall suffer loss, but he himself shall be saved, yet so as by fire. And obviously in the types of material that you find in verse 12, now if any man build upon this foundation gold, silver, precious stones, obviously those are what is going to survive, and the wood, hay, and stubble is what is going to be burned. You know, when they burned them at the stake, you know, some of those stories you read, there's two books that you could have. Fox's Book of Martyrs, and the other one is, I think, is there Martyr's Mirror? Anybody hear that? Martyr's Mirror. The one that we would have would be Fox's Book of Martyrs. And then I think every Amishman has Martyr's Mirror. And usually that's in German. And those two books will be on the coffee table. Anybody have Fox's Book of Martyrs? Or yeah. And then some of them, I used to read them. I have them for years. But they can be just a paragraph. It's not like you have to, it's not endless reading. You're reading just short stories of first century Christians. Yes, sir.
Somewhere not too long ago, the people who published the Fox's Book of Martyrs have been given a soft message. If you want the real down and dirty facts, you have to get the old editions.
Absolutely. In other words, it's revised.
Yes, it's seeker-friendly, so-called.
Well, the Scotsman here. Alistair Begg. He did a revision of Charles Spurgeon's Morning and Evening. Is it Morning and Evening?
Yeah.
Why would you get that? It's beyond me. I mean, people understand plain English, and Spurgeon wrote in plain English. I mean, it is just the dumbing down of America. Dumb. Why would you buy the revised version? I don't get it. Now, we used to have a ministry, and it's not to say we could not continue this ministry. It's kind of gone by the wayside. We used to give away 3 books: a Bible, a Fox's Book of Martyrs, help me out. Oh, and Pilgrim's Progress. They did that with Pilgrim's Progress. I have no desire to read the revised version. They have a revised Pilgrim's Progress. I mean, you got to be a dumbbell to have to. I can't understand the original. Why can't you understand that? It's just written in plain English. And if you get the real deal, in the margin, all the verses are there. When he wrote that, all the verses are there. Now, when he wrote in the prison, John Bunyan, now I'm not saying he wrote Pilgrim's Progress while he was in prison. I'm not quite sure. He's written a few books, but he would take the sour milk they would give him and take maybe the wax paper that was on the top, and he would take that paper, make it into a pen, and he would write it with the mold or whatever was in the prison walls on that page. Somehow would write it with that. Yeah, I've read about it. Where he would write while he was in there with the black mold or the fungus while he was in prison. And why was he in prison? For preaching. Yes.
He would have been allowed to preach if he would have submitted his sermons to the king first and have them approved by the government. He refused the license.
Well, yeah. Now, by the way, anybody licensed to preach in the Bible, license means what? Given liberty or permission. You gotta have a license to go fish. You're given liberty to do that. Who is licensed to preach in the Bible? Paul was. When he was on the castle steps, and the centurion gave him license. It does say that. Gave him permission to preach. And he preached in what tongue? Hebrew. And they were shocked. If you know somebody, and then all of a sudden they're speaking some foreign language, wouldn't that shock you if you'd never heard them before? That's when they kept real quiet, because he's speaking our language, and so on. And because a lot of times people did think people were too smart or very educated. Anyway, we would give away those 3 books, and then we realized the books we bought, because we were buying them in bulk, they were revised. It just really, we might still have some up there. Yes?
The Romans, they knew a whole lot of languages except for Hebrew.
Say that again?
The Romans knew a lot of languages, but not Hebrew.
They didn't know Hebrew.
So, I think he would have told him to shut up if he spoke to them something they understood.
Maybe. Paul was pretty smart. Anyway, we gave the Bible and those 2 books to academic libraries. All right? Not to public libraries. There's a difference between a public library, where you go to the library, is a public library. An academic library is what's on Cleveland State's campus, Case Western Reserves, Solon High School, Chagrin Falls. We would go to the middle schools and the high schools and give them away. And then we had a bunch of girls were coming here at the time. We had bus kids, and we were busing people in from Garfield, and we gave it away to the library in Garfield at the high school. And one of the girls, it was a black girl, was working in the library, and she put the Bible up as the book of the week. To say that you cannot do that is not true. That you have no way to get it into the library, or they won't accept it. That is not true. There was only one that was resistant and was unfriendly. I mean, we would get letters We have an introductory letter. If somebody's interested in doing that, let me know. We have an introductory letter, and we gave it to Bedford, middle school and junior high and high school. And we would go around giving them away. It was free, and Earl did that for us. But he only had resistance in maybe a couple libraries. They took it, but they were pretty nasty. It was more the uppity, nose in the air community that was like that. There was only of all of them that we did, there was only a couple that was resistant like that. Otherwise, they were very friendly about it and kind of upbeat about it. So to say these blanket statements that God's not in the schools, you can't get in there, nonsense. That is not true. You cannot pray in a public, let's say you cannot pray in a public school. Is that true or false? That's as false as it gets. You could be praying right now, for all I know. You could pray in the shower. What's to stop you? Right? If you're going to get on the PA system, now somebody might stop you in the principal's office and do that for morning announcements. But in some schools, they probably still do that. They do that anyway, and then somebody has to complain, and on it goes. A lot of that's just a lot of nonsense. Now, with that, 1 Corinthians 3, I want you, we've been over this 2 or 3 times recently. Go to Revelation 15:2. Revelation 15, verse 2. Revelation 15, verse 2. I've only read this in one commentary. Verse 2, that this fire, we're at, by the way, this is the 3rd time through the Great Tribulation. It's not one discombobulated story. It all makes sense. It all lines up. And the first coming of Christ, how many stories are told of that? The first coming of Christ. 4. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Book of Revelation is the second coming of Christ. So logically, how many stories are told of that? 4. So from Revelation 6 through Revelation 18, it goes through the story 4 times. It just repeats it. It's just not one bunch of woes right on top of another. It's retelling the story. And every time it ends with 2 things. What does it end with? The earthquake and...
Return of Christ.
No. The Battle of Armageddon. All right? I mean, how many times can you slaughter half the earth, I mean, if you're doing nuclear science, well, you have half-lives. And if you divide it in half, it never gets to 0, right? If you keep dividing the square up. If it's 1 and you keep dividing it in half, it'll go on to infinity. It's divided 4 ways. 4 ways. And it always ends with 2 things. The great earthquake and the Battle of Armageddon. It only says Armageddon once, but the battle is given. Look at verse 20 of Revelation 14. And the winepress was trodden without the city, and blood came out of the winepress even under the horse's bridle by the space of 1,600 furlongs. Now how many times? Look at verse 19. Cast in the great winepress of the wrath of God. There's the Battle of Armageddon. I mean, how many times can you squish all the population? Right? It's like preachers when they say, I skinned them alive. When you skin a rabbit, what happens to them? They die. It's over. It's called casing. You case them. You don't skin the sheep. They die. You don't do that, right? How many times can you have the Battle of Armageddon? Only once. Right now, verse 2. Revelation 15, verse 2. And I saw, as it were, a sea of glass mingled with fire, Now, it was suggested in this commentary I read that that could be the remnants or part of the judgment seat of Christ that is going on there. All right, just throwing that out as food for thought, that that's what's going on. So while the Great Tribulation is going on, one theory is that we have been raptured out of here, and during that a time while the tribulation is going on, we're being judged. And as soon as that is over, then the return, the second coming, we come back with him. The first coming, it's in two phases, right? He reveals himself only to the saved. Only to the saved. In that 30, when he becomes the priest, he reveals himself to the lost. All right, as an adult. At the second coming, he reveals himself again in two phases. At the rapture, only to the saved. And when it's touchdown, folks, he reveals himself to the lost and he kills them. You know, and he doesn't need our help, by the way. Right? All right. Now, back here to John. That's just rehashing things we already know. Revelation 21, verses 15 through 17, the commission of Peter, given something to do. The elder's crown. 1 Peter 5:2. Keep your place in John 21. 1 Peter 5:2. Feed the flock of God which is among you, taking the oversight thereof, not by constraint, but willingly, not for filthy lucre, but of a ready mind. All right, and you receive in verse 4 the crown of glory. We call that the elder's crown. Now notice it says not by constraint. You're not forced into this. You want to be what kind of called? The preacher. God called, not mama called. We come from a whole line of preachers, right? And because of that, it's the family business. All right, not by constraint, but willingly, not for filthy lucre. All right, it's kind of like the outsiders today in the Republican Party. What's the establishment afraid of? They're going to bust up what? The gravy train. I don't know what's going on over there at Washington, but if 5 of the richest counties, of the 7 richest counties, touch Washington, D.C., somebody's on the gravy train. And they don't want that broke up. So for filthy lucre, right? It's done for that. But of a ready mind and so on. People's motives are, weird. People have some strange motives, right? What is a motive for going to work, by the way?
Hunger.
Money to buy the food for the hunger, right? And God supplies you a job, right? And so on. And it's certainly not to say that the preacher should not be saved. Paid.
It's a good idea.
Paid. That is a good idea. All right, feed my lambs, feed my sheep. The lambs get the milk. The sheep get the meat. Right? So there's different levels there. 1 Peter 2:2, the sincere milk of the word. Is that what it says there? 1 Peter 2:2. As newborn babes desire the sincere milk of the word that you may grow thereby. Hebrews 5. This is where he says in 6 to moveon.com. In Hebrews 5, just before that, verses 12 and 13. For when the time ye ought to be teachers, ye have need that one teach you again, which be the first principles of the oracles of God, and are become such as have need of milk and not of strong meat. For everyone that useth milk is unskillful in the word of righteousness, for he is a babe. For strong meat belongeth to them that are full age. All right? That is the meat there. And Hebrews 6:1. Therefore, leaving the principles of the doctrine of Christ, let us go on unto perfection. Well, folks, I'm not preaching salvation this morning. Now, not to say that I don't or won't. But the assumption is that the church is for the saints, not for the ain'ts. That's what's for. In the book of Acts, in the New Testament there, where did the people get saved? Physical location. Inside the church or outside the church? Outside the church, out in the streets, while they were still preaching in the temple. And it's not the temple here with Jews. What kind of a ghetto do we live in? And a ghetto is not a bad word, by the way. When you think of a ghetto, what do you normally think of? You think of a slum. A slum is a slum. A slum is a ghetto. A slum is a certain kind of ghetto. Who invented the word ghetto? When was it generally used? A lot. World War II, and it described who lived. Jewish people. Those were called ghettos. And they were really turned into slums. Right? But if this whole part of the country is a ghetto of what? It just means a big congregation of a certain kind of people. Roman Catholics. Everybody's Catholic here, right? Because of the potato famine and whatever else happened in 1870 and in 1910, and they all came over. So we're not preaching salvation. Those people get saved. It'd be like as if you get saved in the Catholic Church, and then you're friendly with the priest, and the priest said, "Well, if you'd like," and they're not going to let you do this. Would you like to say a few words? Right? They invited Paul to say a few words, right? Because he was well known. And it'd be like the bishop getting saved, and he gets up in front of the whole congregation and says, "Well, something happened," right? And would preach salvation in the temple at the Catholic Church. That would be equivalent to that. But people get saved outside the church, then they come in. And where does the world want the gospel preached? It's okay to do that. Pardon? In church. Bruce Musselman used to call it sewer rats. The world wants you to be like sewer rats, right here, in the sewers. And they don't want the sewer rats out. Right? It's when we go out there that we preach it, right? In here, it's a pep rally. This is a pep rally for Christians, encouragement, and so on. Not to say we don't preach the gospel. That's what the general theme would be. All right. 2 Timothy, let's go and look at these verses. 2 Timothy 2:2. We use that on, if you go through the discipleship program and you issue a plaque, we give this one to the men on their plaque, this 2:2. And the things that thou hast heard of me among many witnesses, the same commit thou to faithful men who shall be able to teach others also. Now you may say men, meaning men as you and I were taught 50, 60 years ago in school. When you said men, it was, I don't know what the English terms would be, but it would be in reference to men and women. When we say he, this political correctness is just, it's been going on for 40, 50 years. It's dumb. When you say he, it means both. You don't say he and all this he and she business. He and she. It just, and what I don't understand is why do people jump on the bandwagon of that nonsense? Why are we so stupid today? So anyway, we use that one for the men, and then we use the one that Mary hath chosen that better part to be at the feet of Jesus when we present it for the woman who goes through the discipleship program. Is that she was at the feet of Jesus, and she has chosen the better part. Here we do that. Verse 15, study to show thyself approved unto God, a workman that needeth not be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. Now we preach these sign gifts were given. Notice in 2 Timothy 2, today we are a workman and we need to study to show ourselves approved. Man, Peter, they said that was an ignorant fisherman, and they took note that they had been with Jesus. They just got up there and did it. He didn't have to hit the books. He was a fisherman. He didn't go to Harvard or Yale. Those weren't those missionary or Christian colleges and they were training preachers. And when those guys went to the college, some of them went when they were 13 and 14 years old. You know, it wasn't when they, because they're born with brains. They're just born that way. They have oodles of brains. Oh, let's throw this other one in here. I read this someplace. 1 Corinthians, the one on charity, 13. Go there quickly and keep your hand. We'll go back to these other two verses. When we do that sincere mouth of the word, in one, I forget where I read it. It could be in one of Ruckman's. They said, well, in the end, even though we're on meat and we can progress, compared to when we get to heaven, we're still just children. And always will be while we're in this body. And in reading this, when I was a child, I spake as a child, I understood as a child, I thought as a child, but when I became a man, I put away childish things. For now we see through a glass darkly. Now, right now, we see through that. And it's still a fog. We haven't seen the other side. And we don't know everything, folks. And God doesn't have to reveal everything to us. He'll reveal to us what we need to know. The secret things belong unto the Lord. Where's that verse? Deuteronomy what? You got it, sister. Yeah, we've been over that so many times. Deuteronomy 29:29. The secret things belong unto the Lord. And then, but what has been revealed to us, the rest of that verse, he's revealed things to us. On the other side, if you go to 1 Corinthians chapter 1, I think, or chapter 2. 1 Corinthians, go there, 2. We can't quote these verses outside of their context. Verse 9, but as it is written, eye hath not seen nor ear heard, neither hath entered into, verse 9 of 1 Corinthians 2, entered in the heart of man the things which God hath prepared for them that love him. All right, now, that's true. But what are you supposed to do when you have any question about a verse, by the way? Put it in its context. Go to the verse before it. Because usually you have a question. You have a question. The answer is in the verse before it, or it could be in the verse after, or near there. If you don't know what a verse means, or a word means, by the way, in the King James Bible, usually it's in the verse, or the verse before or after, it defines the word. You don't have to go to Webster's. Most of the time it defines the word. Well, look at the next verse. But God hath revealed them, verse 9, unto us by his Spirit. For the Spirit searcheth all things, yea, the deep things of God. So the Holy Spirit reveals that. Today, what is revealed for us, what's on the other side, is what's recorded in this book. What's been recorded in this book. So we can confidently preach and say what is in this book, that's been revealed to us. And we can with confidence say those things. All right, 1 Timothy 3:2, getting back to this teaching. 1 Timothy 3:2. All right, a bishop then must be blameless, the husband of one wife, vigilant, sober, of good behavior, given hospitality, apt to teach. All right, it doesn't necessarily say apt to preach, but apt to teach. They have to be able to teach the Bible systematically, plodding along, you know. 1 Timothy 5:17. Let the elders that rule well. Now there's elders that rule, but they don't necessarily rule well. Be counted worthy of double honor, especially they who labor in the word and doctrine. So there's labor involved, especially today. There's labor in that. Years ago, men didn't live real long. You know, when I say years ago, I mean 100 years ago, 200 years ago. They're living longer. Why wouldn't preachers live a long time back then? Other than eating greasy pork and, you know, there's probably a couple reasons. If you overwork, you'll die of what? You work yourself to death. You die of a heart attack.
But we're out.
And if you're laying around,
The rust out.
you rust out. Right. No exercise. Right? So, it could go either way. And you could die young that way. All right, the Word of God is supernatural food. Is that in your notes? A man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God. The three temptations, and where are all those verses quoted from? Deuteronomy. All right, when you get to Deuteronomy, are you real thrilled when you start reading that book? Usually you are not thrilled. But that's what Jesus quoted. He quoted all of Deuteronomy. Okay? All right, the warning to Peter. Verses 18 and 19. And we are over. I gave you a lot of extra goodies in there. But stuff that you already knew. Verses 18 and 19. The warning to Peter. Verily, verily. By the way, where are all the verily, verilies? In the book of John. How many times? Nope. That'd be a good guess. 25 times. It's 25 times. So when you hear the verse and they say, verily, verily, they're always, always in the Gospel of John. Where is that? We want you to be able to find your way around. When you hear that, it's in John. Now, if you're reading one of the funny books, who knows? Who knows where it is? But it's in the Gospel of John. And we'll start right here next week on the warning to Peter. And then we'll get our next lessons going here soon. Father, bless now the preaching to follow. In Christ's name, amen.